Cheers guys, Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek. I'm going to do something a little different this time. There is a podcast that I listen to, Shane R. Monroe. He does a podcast and it's basically just called Passenger Seat Radio. And what he does is he records himself narrating his podcast basically on his 30-mile or 13-mile, can't remember which, in Arizona commute to work each day, which, if you kind of think about it, is brilliant because that's usually time that we write off, right? We don't really include that as productive time. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are people who use that as time to kind of think, decompress, get ready for work, but not really to do a podcast. So kind of like that idea, and in that spirit wanted to do basically a video of that. So I'm gonna try this as a series, see how it works out, and if it's something we both enjoy, I'll keep doing it. If not, well, we'll see, but we'll take it one video at a time. I'm just going to get a little bit more, there we go, angle. Perfect. So what are we going to talk about? Well, there are a bunch of things on the virtual plate. And what I'll try to do is not just come up with different topics, but if there are topics that, you know, require closure or updates, revisit them throughout the week, right? So we are, and it would probably help if I knew what freaking day it was, we are currently Wednesday, and I believe it's March 29th. 2016. I'll start that off properly each time I do this, but yeah, suffice it to say it is Wednesday, March 2016, and spring is almost upon us, as are a bunch of other things. So some of the stuff I want to talk about: virtual reality, guys. We are here. We are literally here, and this is something that amazes me, but at the same time kind of perplexes me. And let me explain what I mean. You would think that as a society, being literally at the doorstep of the paradigm shift that's about to happen, there would be more, well, frankly, excitement. There isn't. But I think there's a reason for that. I don't think people understand virtual reality until they actually have that mask covering their eyes and they are actually immersed. I think 3D was such a gimmicky thing, such an ad sell, right, if you will, that it hasn't done virtual reality any justice. And those who pass off virtual reality as exactly that, just kind of a pass-by-night fad, I can't blame them, right? The precedents have been set, starting with 1990s horrible VR, right? Heart was in the right place, but that VFX unit, the one that you could use with the original System Shock, that was 320 by 200. We're talking VGA resolution per eye compared to 1080p now. That still sounds kind of impressive, right, for back then, because you got to think that was 20 years ago. But, and here's the caveat to that, technology has changed so much within each of those disciplines, right? So not just has the pixel resolution gotten better, but the quality of the screen, the quality of the lighting, the quality of the technology has also gotten better. So comparing virtual reality then to now, apples to apples, strictly based on resolution, just doesn't do the argument justice, right? Because it's excelled in so many other areas as well. So, all right, back to some of the other stuff. What else did we have in the 90s? We had virtual Nintendo. Now, is there really anything more that needs to be said with regards to virtual Nintendo other than, holy shit, Nintendo literally shit the bed on that one, right? There's not much more to say. It literally was one of those releases that if you could give any company one do-over, that would be the one that they would do over, right? I'm confident Nintendo would do that one over. A lot of the technology, you know, their intentions were good, and a lot of that would ultimately find its way into the Nintendo 3DS. But what I think was failing at the time was a way to express that technology. And I think they found a better way to express that, certain with the 3DS. And even that was bumpy. If you talk to people who own the original 3DS and ask them, you know, the 3D question, like, do you use the 3D feature on your 3DS? Most of them are going to say, let's see if I can go past this car. Yeah, most of them are going to say no. They did not use the 3D feature, right? And the reason for that is it was flaky at best. It was not reliable. You would move your head just a few millimeters, right? And it would ruin the 3D immersion. Now, Nintendo, on their subsequent hardware release, the latest, the 3DS, new 3DS, they fixed that. Had that been the case from launch, the whole 3D thing might have gone differently for Nintendo, right? But you ask people that same question now, people who own a new 3DS, right, with that stable 3D feature, and you'll be hard-pressed to find somebody who actually turns it off. And it was just rolled out better. That's the bottom line, right? So here we are, fast forward 2016, we are at the dawn of something that is going to literally change the landscape of gaming, the landscape of humanity. And I don't think people realize how big this is going to be. And you can make all the arguments you want for and against virtual reality, right? At the end of the day, if porn finds it, they will come. And that sounds horrible, that sounds literal, and in some senses I meant that literally. Yes, if porn can find virtual reality, they will come, and the masses will most definitely come all over their screens, all over their virtual reality goggles, because porn, full stop, end of story, right? But there are so many other subsets of what you can do with virtual reality. I mean, talk about a tool to aid the infirmed, right? Those people who are locked up at home. The people who, literally are trapped in their bodies, whether it's Parkinson's or some other kind of, nerve disorder or disease, if you will. These are all people that virtual reality frees up, right? Old people. Something as simple as using this virtual reality to experience neighborhoods where they grew up, right? I mean, just walking around, like, think of it as a picture book, as a photo album. There are so many training. You could train people with this technology to fix cars, almost any procedure that you can think of, you can actually train people. Now, would you trust somebody doing open heart surgery on you that's only done this in a surgery simulator? Probably not. But you got to think, it's getting to the point where a lot could be done virtually. A lot of training, certain areas of practicum could be done using virtual reality. So there's just so many possibilities that I just don't think there's any way this could fail, right? It's a steep price point, and we'll get into what I paid in a second. There is no doubting it's a steep price point, right? You know, and I might as well say it. Let's get into it right now. I backed ultimately the HTC Vive. All right, and several reasons for that. Let me just fix my milk drink here so it doesn't spill all over Hell's Half Acre. So the reasons I went with the HTC Vive are as follows. So first off, a lot of what the Oculus Rift should have included, considering they were the front runners, right, wasn't included. And to me, that's huge. Let me explain. Using a gamepad, an Xbox 360 controller gamepad for virtual reality is going to bust through the fourth wall. It is going to ruin the sense of immersion. You're using a freaking gamepad to control your game avatar, right? That's not the way to do it. That is not the way to do it. You need that proper controller right off the bat, and HTC Vive got that. They understood that. They've launched with a controller. You can say what you want about the controller. It might not be ergonomically exactly as you see fit, right? Yes, Oculus Rift could one-up it. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. They didn't. They launched with a gamepad. End of story, right? HTC can and will improve that controller scheme, but for now, you have not only the controllers, you also have the virtual room. And to me, that's even bigger than the controller faux pas, right? Let me explain. Virtual reality is a natural fit for anything cockpit based, right? Just by its nature. If you are sitting in the driver's seat or in the flyer seat, it's probably going to benefit from virtual reality, right? Think about it. Any kind of dogfighting game, racing game, snippets of a game that involve chasing, all of that's going to work extremely well, with virtual reality, right? It's going to work really well. What you have missing, and this is huge, this is absolutely huge, is you ruin the sense of immersion as soon as you try to get up off your seat, okay? Now, here's an example. Elite Dangerous. For me, that's a day one purchase, right? I bought that game as soon as it was released, solely, strictly based on virtual reality goggles. That was the reason I purchased the game. I have not played the game other than to check out the controls and, you know, tweak and fine-tune a few things, because this was always going to be my virtual reality game. This was always going to be something I did with either the Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive or whatever, right? That hasn't changed. It still will be. What is amazing about Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen and some of these other ones is there is an ability to basically get up out of your seat and walk around the deck of your ship, right? Some ships are really small, you know, like your Cobra Mark III, you're not going to have a lot of room to walk around in, but some of them have an appreciable amount of space. Now, if you could choose between simply being stuck in your cockpit or being able to walk around, to me, it's like, it's the difference between being able to walk and not being able to walk, right? Here's a wheelchair, here's your ability to walk. You're gonna choose walk every single time. And to me, the difference was that colossal, right? The HTC Vive is going to allow me to walk. The Oculus Rift is confining me to a wheelchair. And intentions being noble, I get all of that. But you're trying to sell me a 360 gamepad controller and a wheelchair with a tagline, oh yeah, have fun. It's not working. I'm not feeling that. And considering that the Facebook acquisition injected billions, for sure millions, tens of millions of dollars into the Oculus Rift, there is no bloody excuse for it not having those features ready for day one. In fact, I would use the counter argument. They should have done whatever it took to provide you with the ability to walk and control and then just improve on it, right? I think it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be huge for HTC. Is this going to have them win the race? Look, I'm probably the worst guy to base your future technology stakes on, because my family was one that did the Betamax, right? And Christ, unless you've done beta, you don't know the meaning of misery and of pain. When you see video store selections dwindle like they did for the people who had a Betamax, well, you know true pain, right? Basically, you were left with one store to rent your movies from, Sony. And then even Sony phased it out. And the last thing to go was the ability to buy a Betamax tape, right? You were able to buy tapes, Christ, I think right up until the late 90s, even early 2000s, you could still buy Betamax tapes, right? But the point being, if you backed Betamax, like my family did, you were on the losing side of history, right? Technology greatness aside, and I've heard pros and cons both ways, end result is the same. You picked the loser, and I picked the loser. So I think it's too early to tell for the HTC Vive, but it is a huge step for me personally, and that's why I relay it to you, the viewer. You know, you come to your own decision, right? Do you agree? For you, is it the difference between walking and a wheelchair, right? Again, I took it that serious. So those are the two big ones for me. The control scheme and the virtual room aspect. Then there's some other nice things that just made design sense, right? The front-facing camera, to me, was an absolute no-brainer once it entered into the equation. And again, that's one of those things that you may have gone through 100 iterations and never had somebody suggest it, right? But as soon as it's suggested, it kind of invokes such common sense that you couldn't imagine doing without it, right? And I think that's exactly what we have with that front-facing camera. It wasn't huge, but now that we've introduced it, you can't just do away with it, right? And you're asking people that have an Oculus Rift, like, let's sum it all up here, right? And I know this sounds a little extreme, but it's my marketing dollar, and I take it that seriously, right? You're not only asking them to, so here's your virtual reality, right? But you got to sit in this wheelchair. This is your controller scheme. We know that there's state-of-the-art stuff out there, but you can only guide your wheelchair with a 360 controller, okay? And we need you to squint. Like, sorry? Come again? No, we need you to squint. When you're playing this virtual reality, you need to squint so you can see where you're going in real life versus, right? Think about it. It's that ridiculous, right? You're basically asking people who are backing Oculus Rift to pretend that the front-facing camera doesn't exist. And that could get really messy, right? And dangerous. And it, again, with the cash infusion that they had, it should have been something that Oculus introduced. So 3 features right off the bat: the controller scheme, the front-facing camera, right, and the lighthouse virtual room. That's huge. So you know, we're about 2/3 of the way through my commute, but let's at least end the virtual reality topic there. So I've placed the pre-order, right? I've paid my money. I have the virtual reality shipping out to me in May, and hopefully I receive it by June. You know, I suppose if I receive it by June, July, I'm laughing. I will be very, very, very happy. So hopefully that's the case, but we shall see. We shall see. So my fingers are absolutely crossed that that's the case. And there's going to be more updates from me, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to wait and see. We're going to get this, and then we're going to let the battle wage, right? Because the last thing to say is it is going to be a bloody conflict. This is going to be a war unlike any we've seen before. And you could argue that it's new enough of a technology, right, that it's going to limit entry just by virtue of it being, you know, this new, right? Like, think about a third player coming in right now. And technically, I guess Sony is third. But all those arguments I made for the Oculus Rift, right? Sony also failed on, right? With the added being that they basically admit that their existing PlayStation 4, as powerful as it is, right, is not really capable of driving virtual reality the same way a properly spec'd PC can drive virtual reality via the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift, right? So that's huge. That's a differentiator right off the bat. So I think of the PlayStation, I think of Morpheus just more as a toy than something to take serious, right? And like I said, at the end of the day, you can go whichever way you want with arguments, but which one is pouring on a back? And when they do, that's the winner, right? It's happened before with VHS and Betamax. I went through that little illustration, but really, that's what it boiled down to. Which one are the consumers going to adopt, right? And for all I know, I've picked the wrong one, but at least I'm comfortable knowing that I've got those features day one, right? So that is pretty freaking cool. So that's the end of that topic.